Arnold, would you? Don't sit down, Arnold. Come on up. What? Again. Ah, there we go. So, Arnold, it's your time. Come on up. Just stand here. You can come a little closer. Don't be shy. All right. You'll get your chance with the microphone here too in a minute. Arnold, would you? I would wager that it's safe to say most of you in the room know Arnold, so I don't really need to read a resume for him. But for the record, there are clearly some things that need to be said. Of course, the reason he's standing up here is because of the work he did to make the Oregon Planning Program a reality. And no Oregon statewide planning story is complete without acknowledging the role of Arnold Cogan. While we all know Arnold in his long-standing role as founding principal of the firm first known as Cogan, Sharp Cogan, and now Cogan, Owens Cogan, his story is intimately woven into the building of the state's efforts to balance and manage growth, to ensure that the built environment, the natural environment, and the timber and agriculture industries would remain sustainable and accessible to its citizens. Arnold's relationship to the Oregon story began when he was tapped by Governor Tom McCall to be the planning coordinator for the governor's newly formed planning office, which included working on legislation for a state planning program. His original task was to get Senate Bill 10 through the 1969 legislature, but the real success came, of course, with Senate Bill 100 in 1973. Now you've heard all this before, so I hadn't seen Dave's slideshow, but we got to get it on the record here, of course, for this presentation. Arnold then, of course, became the first director of the Land Conservation and Development Department. His charge was no small task, as you've just seen, to develop the statewide planning goals called for in the bill. He crisscrossed the state with his merry band of planners, including Sumner Sharp and a number of others, some of whom are in the room tonight, as we've just seen, to make this a reality and documented in the film called People and the Land, which we unfortunately don't have time to play tonight, but if you ever get a chance to see it, it's definitely worth the viewing. But it's only 30 minutes. It's only 30 minutes long, so it's not that tedious. But there are a number of other accomplishments in his long career in Oregon. He started out as a planner for the city of Portland under his mentor Lloyd Keefe, and moved on to be the planning director at the Port of Portland before going to work for Governor McCall. And for the last 30-plus years, he's teamed with his wife Elaine at Cogan Owens Cogan. There she is, right there. To provide high-quality planning advice to communities and clients throughout the Northwest and far beyond. When APA decided to bestow the title of Fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners on their most distinguished members, Arnold was among the few selected for that first class of fellows, which is a great honor, by the way. Actually, Arnold was born close to that other Portland in Maine, but after moving from the East Coast, he attended Grant High School right here in Northeast Portland, where he met his future wife and partner, Elaine. Elaine says they gravitated together because they both had Eastern accents. I guess that tells you something. Elaine says also that one of their classmates on the debate team with Arnold was Senator Bob Packwood, and to this day he still calls him Arnie, which nobody else does, I guess. Not surprisingly, though, one of Arnold's passions is his family. He's the father of 3 and the grandfather of 7, who all adore him and turn to him for advice and sound judgment, and often for his mediation skills, too, I understand. His wisdom is sought by not just those precious family members, but by many professionals and students. He has taken his first stalwart supporter, Lloyd Keefe's mentoring to heart, providing guidance, direction, and opportunities to many Oregonians. So, Arnold, I'm humbled and honored to be your colleague and friend, and to give you this award, which somehow seems not enough for all that you've given to this state and your profession. So, So the award says, Career Achievement Award to Arnold Cogan, FAICP, for exceptional dedication and service to Oregon in land use planning, from his many lifelong friends at the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank all of you here. I do appreciate your friendship and your warmth and this evening, and I appreciate very much this token from OAPA. I can't tell you how much it means to me. I might explain the picture here that I want to say that I don't think Elaine has changed too much here. At least that's the way I still see her today. But you probably might notice a few differences between that picture and me tonight here. So, a few, yeah. But again, I'm not going to talk too much, but I do want to say that how much I appreciate this, and I'm going to have a chance to say a few more words at tomorrow noon at the keynote. Thanks to Elise here, who roped me into the keynote work for the lunch tomorrow. But and I'll cover some of the ground that Dave did so well, and I appreciate, Dave, your presentation. But again, thank you so much. Good to see so many friends, colleagues, and I do and relish this very much to be with you tonight. Thank you.
So now I have the distinct honor once again of introducing Arnold Cogan. For those of you who were at the gala awards, gala dinner last night, the celebration, we surprised Arnold with a special award, speaking of awards, for career achievement. I think he really was surprised and a little overwhelmed, I think, at the time. But he gets now to talk and give you some idea of why we still value him so much in this profession here in Oregon. Just a brief history. We've got to do these things. Everybody knows Arnold probably pretty well, so he's certainly highly respected for his more than 40 years of professional experience in the fields of policy planning, public engagement, intergovernmental relations, and public policy dispute resolution. He was Oregon's first planning coordinator under Tom McCall, first director of the State Department of Land Conservation and Development, the first director of the Port of Portland, a planning director, I should say, and he was in the first class of fellows of the College of Fellows of the American Institute of Certified Planners when it was first established. So he's a first-class guy. That's all I can say. He's top of the class here. And of course, long known for his founding role and his ongoing leadership over the years of Cogan Owens Cogan with his partners who are sitting next to him, Elaine Cogan and Jim Owens, one of the certainly premier planning firms in the Northwest. So Arnold, there's not much more I can say. Come on up here and tell us what you think. Give a round of applause for Arnold.
That's enough. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. And I appreciate that introduction. It's very nice. And I'm going to get started here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's obvious at this conference that celebration is in the air. With the 40th anniversary of land use planning and the 100th birthday of Tom McCall, it's hard to escape the opportunity to reflect. Today, during my conversation with you, I want to look back and forward at the same time, and we can learn from the past to prepare ourselves confidently for the future. Everyone in this room has dealt in one way or another with difficulties and obstacles in the path to reach the point where we are today. And before we go further, let's acknowledge the hard work of all city, county, regional, and state planners who are here today. Would you please stand up so we can publicly say thank you? Good job. Not all of you stood, but thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to take you back to the beginning of the Tom McCall era, about 50 years ago. McCall, as many of you know, was a vigorous commentator on KGW TV for environmental causes before he became a politician. He won a national award for a TV documentary titled Pollution in Paradise that chronicled extensive pollution problems of the Willamette River. That helped him win his first elective post as Secretary of State. His environmental credentials and his marvelous turn of a phrase enabled him to beat Bob Straub in 1967, winning the election for governor. Unlike his predecessor, Mark Hatfield, McCall relied on his personal instincts and made livability his campaign theme, promising to protect Oregon's air, water, and land as a condition of economic growth. After his election, McCall's office became a beehive of activity. The immaculate birth of Oregon's land use program actually occurred several years before 1973. In fact, in 1967, when he was sworn into office. His commitment to protecting the state's environment was expressed in his inaugural address when he said, quote, "Health, economic strength, recreation, in fact, the entire outlook and image of the state are tied inseparably to the environment. Water, air, land, and scenic pollution threaten these and other values. The overriding challenge of the decade is quality of life in Oregon." End of quote. Almost immediately, he persuaded the legislature to create several pioneering programs, Beach Bill, Bottle Bill, and a new state planning office. Shortly after, I was hired to head up that state planning office. When the legislature placed state planning in the governor's office, one of McCall's proudest moments was when he was designated chief planner of the state. In fact, he liked that title better than being called governor. Thus began a whirlwind of activity driven by the optimistic enthusiasm of Governor McCall. Frenetic is the word to describe McCall's first term. And there were two significant impacts on the planning office that have a bearing on where we are today. One had to do with regional planning. This was at the height of President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. Each state was required to prepare regional plans if they wanted block grant money from the feds for roads, public safety, housing, health, especially in more populated areas. So we initiated a comprehensive planning program for all of these programs. To do this, we proposed organizing the state into districts to do regional planning. Although we liked the idea, it was no surprise that legislators, mayors, and county commissioners hated it. They saw this effort as a threat to local decision-making authority. We should keep this in mind today as we try to advance the concept of regional planning. Well, this kerfuffle lasted most of McCall's first term. And to compromise and get something done, we set our sights lower and organized regional planning districts only in places where the feds absolutely required them. For example, transportation money for MPOs, which continue to this day. Another activity we tried to initiate was something like the land use planning we know today. And that started early in McCall's first term, and by the '69 session of the legislature, I was given responsibility to work with legislators on 4 bills. Senate Bills 10, 11, 12, and 13. And that was my first experience as a lobbyist, and I had to learn fast. In a special message of support for those bills, McCall said that without strong land use planning, we would see what he called, quote, an urban explosion of environmental pollution threatening the livability of Oregon. End of that segment. And I especially like this part when he warned of a, quote, scatteration of unimaginative, mislocated urban development, introducing little cancerous cells of unmentionable ugliness into our rural landscape, whose cumulative effect threatened to turn this state of scenic excitement into a land of aesthetic boredom. As some of you know, Senate Bill 10 passed in that session, required every city and county to adopt comprehensive land use plans and zoning by the end of 1971. The other three bills dealt with a variety of specific issues. Well, only Senate Bill 10 survived, even though McCall had strongly defended the need for all four. So much for my career as a lobbyist. The goals embedded in Senate Bill 10 ultimately had great influence on Senate Bill 100 4 years later. In fact, had the four bills passed in '69, we wouldn't have had while we wouldn't have had all the bells and whistles of Senate Bill 100, we would have celebrated the 40th anniversary 4 years ago. If Tom McCall's first term was frenetic, the second was a sprint to the finish line. And because Senate Bill 10 was relatively weak and many cities and counties were unable to implement the measure, the governor declared his goal to produce a strong, comprehensive land use bill in the '73 session of the legislature. To engage public and private interest at the very beginning, the governor created the Willamette Valley Council. And that council initiated Project Foresight with two scenarios. One featured unfettered growth, and the other concentrated growth inside urban growth boundaries. Lawrence Halpern Associates of San Francisco was hired to develop the scenarios displayed in the famous Willamette Valley Coloring Book, published in September '72. Well, after an ambitious dialogue involving 48,000 questionnaires to Willamette Valley residents and 275 meetings with 20,000 people to discuss the scenarios, widespread support was expressed for concentrating growth and preserving farm and forest land. And that set the stage for Senate Bill 100. Governor McCall threw himself into the fray to secure a land use bill. In his now famous speech when the legislature convened in January of '73, he spoke of those phrases we're familiar with: sagebrush subdivisions, coastal condominium, and our need to be protected from the grasping wastrels of the land. These are not exaggerated descriptions of the deteriorated condition of Oregon's landscape at that time. Broad stretches of uninhabitable land in central Oregon were being marketed to unsuspecting buyers all over the country. Shabby housing was spoiling the coast. Uncontrolled sprawl was booming in the Willamette Valley, and random subdivisions were springing up, requiring costly extension of services. Shortly after passage of Senate Bill 100, my first task as director of that newly formed Department of Land Conservation and Development was to secure a sufficient budget. And with all the excitement and celebration, the legislature somehow had overlooked that detail. While we asked for approval of a minimum of 21 positions, the Emergency Board in its wisdom gave us only 9. Still, we plowed to get ahead, and with the enthusiastic engagement of thousands of citizens, the first 14 goals were crafted by the end of 1974. And one of the backbones of the initial program that still exists today was the statewide Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee, or CIAC. They provided invaluable help to us when we mounted over 100 public workshops statewide to assist in writing the goals. That experience with CIAC and the people of Oregon to write the goals was part of a continued commitment to involve citizens all over the state. And at this point, I'd like to ask all of those here who love citizen involvement to raise their hand. If you really like it, raise both hands. And for those of you who can't wait for your next public meeting, jump up and down. Okay, so maybe citizen involvement isn't everyone's favorite here. This is a good place for me to share a personal story of Tom McCall, about Tom McCall. He was the most memorable individual I've ever had the pleasure of knowing or working with. Tom was known as a progressive Republican, a description we may have difficulty visualizing today. He was also a humanitarian, a visionary, a deep thinker, a person with humility and a respect for human values. And my story illustrates all of those characteristics. During Governor McCall's first term, the annual Western States Governors Association meeting was held in Seattle. As they were to take up some planning issues, I and my wife Elaine, who's sitting right down here, were asked to travel with the governor to Seattle. Just before we left, we were told there was a culinary workers' strike in the city and employees were picketing the conference hotel, the Westin, in downtown Seattle. Although some governors ignored the pickets and stayed at the hotel anyway, Governor McCall, as a signal of support for the workers, refused. Instead, he agreed to be shuttled to a motel in Bellevue, several miles away. As his office had already paid for the governor's suite, he insisted that Elaine and I stay there. Even though we hesitated somewhat, we did that. After checking in, we marveled at the generous size of the rooms, along with a bottle of champagne on ice, the lovely bowl of fruit, and some tantalizing displays of cheese and crackers. Suddenly the phone rang, and sure enough, Tom McCall was on the line. When he asked how we were doing, I thanked him and answered in the superlative, not sparing any of those details. His reaction, typically McCall, was, quote, "I'm stuck in this goddamn Holiday Inn over here in Bellevue. But it's for a good cause." He said, "Well, enjoy what you have there, and I'll see you at the reception tonight at the Seattle Center." Well, that was classic McCall, denying himself some creature comforts out of respect for the legitimate rights of people he never knew. Well, that was 40 years ago. We know where we've been. Where should we go next? Well, we still face a number of challenges. Some we didn't even think of 40 years ago. A good place to start is to review the COPE report and its recommendations made 13 years ago. The Committee on the Oregon Planning Experience, or COPE, was established by the board of OAPA in 2000, and it's still relevant today. An important recommendation of that report is that we should create a process to articulate a vision for the spatial development of Oregon that reflects the direction in which the state, in concert with citizens and local government, is heading over the next 20, 30, 40 years. This recommendation is close to one that Dr. Noha Tulanen, Dean Emeritus of the PSU College of Urban and Public Affairs, and I wrote several months ago in a paper we titled, "The Next 40 Years, A New Approach to Planning for the Future of Oregon." We propose formulation of a state strategic vision that acknowledges a probable doubling of the population in the Willamette Valley by 2050, and the likely pressure to expand urban growth boundaries into farm, forest, and natural resource areas. Our challenge is to create and translate a statewide vision into a coordinated infrastructure and growth management strategy that supports public health and comprehensive land use planning of cities, counties, and regions throughout the state. To do this, we propose a new state planning office, not too different from the one that I headed up when Tom McCall was elected first, and that we propose a state planning office led by a planning coordinator in the governor's office. Well, what do you think of that? Is that a way to go? I hope we can consider this in future OAPA conferences and workshops. Another recommendation in the COPE report is to explore regionalism and regional planning. It's heartening to note several strong moves in that direction. By executive order, Governor Kitzhaber created the Oregon Solutions Network with 6 regional solution centers that house state agency staff to help integrate state efforts and invest in regional priorities. Many of you probably already know and already have experience with regional and Oregon solutions. Also getting some deserved attention is a report by OEPA titled Regional Planning for the 21st Century. This report takes a comprehensive look at regional planning in Oregon and proposes a new framework to improve regional planning statewide. We've come a long way with a variety of regional planning for transportation, watersheds, and other programs. And I hope you find some aspect of this report that interests you and that you can support. At the same time, it may not always be easy, but we must continue to have a high regard for the importance of citizen involvement in the planning process. Goal 1 didn't become number 1 by accident. We must do everything we can to keep citizens of our state at the heart of our planning. People have to support the programs we champion if they're going to thrive and meet the needs of tomorrow. And on this subject of citizen involvement, I'd be remiss if I didn't make note of the shifting demographics and cultural changes which are becoming evident in Oregon and throughout the nation. New minorities replacing the old majorities will have a profound impact on our education programs, school siting, housing patterns, neighborhood design. As we anticipate how to integrate our thinking about this new world, I recall when our firm, Cogan Cogan, helped Metro figure out how best to address growth issues in the Portland region. With support from several other firms, we undertook the Great Communities Study. After evaluating exemplary communities around the world, we found a common characteristic, and that was their ability to integrate planning for a diverse number of factors, including walkability and connectivity, affordable housing, educational opportunities, ability to govern, and willingness to finance public facilities. We need that kind of integrated planning if we're going to deal with the coming growth pressures in Oregon. Looking back over the many decades that I've been associated with planning here in Oregon, there's one concern that continues to this day. For too long now, we have allowed much of our planning and our decision-making to be stuck in silos. Some of this is due to funding restrictions. For example, money for transportation can't easily be transferred to other programs, such as education. And economic redevelopment programs are not always beneficial to the homeless. This silo issue is related to what we heard at the Big Ideas Forum yesterday. Tomorrow afternoon, you'll have an opportunity to hear a recap of the results from that session. At the forum, about 200 planners and invited leaders representing a broad range of business, political, environmental, academic, other interests addressed some vital issues of our day, such as economic instability, affordable housing, community health, urban mobility, climate change, and a host of others that have a profound influence on our work. We try to move beyond silo thinking to new ways of collaborating and integrating our energy and creativity. I hope you can find something among the list of actions developed in that forum that challenges you to become personally involved. So in conclusion here, I ask each of you to consider the challenges I've described today and find one or more that engages your interest. Think about the state visioning process that might be helpful both to the state itself as well as to our cities, counties, and regions. Find ways to strengthen regional planning. Keep all citizens, including those with different languages and backgrounds, at the heart of our planning process. Expand your professional practice to include more profound levels of thinking about ways to deal with growth. Continue to merge the silos we frequently confront into more integrated policies and programs. Consider those actions from yesterday's Big Ideas Forum. Become an active participant in the struggle to make this state an even better place for us all, so that 40 years from now, other planners will stay at an OAPA conference like this one, that we confronted those challenges and we dealt with them. I have a final challenge that may at first appear daunting. It's about tikkun olam. That's a Hebrew phrase which means literally repair the world. Beyond that simple translation is the profound idea that we each, you and I, have a responsibility to do everything we can to repair the world, or at least make it a better place. I think about this often. We may believe we are already doing the best we can with our professional work, our volunteer activities as we raise our children, donate to worthy causes, and so on, but that's not enough. Obviously, we cannot change the whole world, but we can try to make our part of the world a better place. So the next time you work on that segment of the comprehensive plan, or a rewrite of the zoning ordinance, or perhaps a new redevelopment plan for a crucial parcel in your city, what additional level of quality can you add? Can you find a place for any of those actions that came out of our Big Ideas Forum yesterday? What logically fits into our regional concept? I'm sure each of you can think of at least one effort you could undertake. And if you did, you could say to yourself, tikkun olam, I just helped repair the world. It's fitting that we close with another of those memorable quotes from Tom McCall. This ties in with my request that you make a commitment to tackle one or more of the challenges I've laid before you and do your part to repair the world. Here's what he said in a speech at the end of his political career. Quote, perhaps our leaders have aimed too low and at the wrong goals. Perhaps there hasn't been enough integrity, vision, and truth-saying to convince us of the folly of eating up tomorrow. We've treated our world with cavalier abandon, but it has always been Tom's first rule of thumb that we have a greater capacity for love than to destroy. And because we are in love with the world, we will not be able to resist the temptation to make it better. In my view, we've now come to the end of a magnificent and challenging era. And at the same time, we're at the beginning of a magnificent, challenging era. So I look forward to working with you as we move forward with that. Thank you. I don't know if you have any time, or not. Maybe other time. What do you got? More stuff?
Well, thank you, Arnold. That was truly brilliant and inspiring, and I am grateful to you for all those wonderful thoughts, and especially those quotes, some of which I haven't heard, and so I think we're all, grateful to you for everything you've done for the profession, and the only thing we can do is give you another bottle. So here's a small token of our appreciation.
Don't shank it around too much.
Yeah, be careful. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you.